So yesterday, as I was recording the Conservative Party Manifesto video, I noticed there was a live video going on the BBC. It was the SNP launching their manifesto, and there are some key points from it we should address. As we all know, Nicola Sturgeon has two major interests. The first is to stop Brexit, to keep Scotland in the EU by supporting a second referendum with Remain on the ballot paper. It should be noted, of the 1 million voters in Scotland that voted to leave the EU, a third of them support independence. But they don't support it to rejoin the EU. They support it because they don't want to be a part of anything. However, Nicola Sturgeon comes down firmly in favour of the UK remaining within the EU or rejoining if Scotland becomes independent. Now, at Westminster, parties have backed a move towards another referendum, as long as Remain is an option on the ballot paper, but the current government will not allow that. Brexit by the SNP is seen as a big change to the UK's constitution that warrants another independence or Indy Ref 2. Even if Brexit is thrown into reverse, the SNP will still use it as leverage to get that independence. Because Scotland's interests, yo. The second is the holding another referendum, which is something Labour might actually do if it gets Jeremy Corbyn into power, by using Nicola Sturgeon's SNP to prop them up. Which I think would be rather interesting, because the SNP would then, if they voted independence, they would then have to leave Parliament, which would cause quite the disruption to Parliament, because if we don't have Scotland anymore, then we have less seats. I wonder if Labour could even consider holding a majority with what they would have after that. It would be quite close. I think it would be very funny, though, if they didn't get enough to have a majority over the Conservatives, who then would have a majority over them. 3 would be to increase spending within the health sector. As health spending is a devolved matter, this comes down to what the SNP are willing to spend. Because of a certain formula, each country within the UK gets a certain amount of money, and that money is what they have to spend on all services. Scotland, though, have been raising taxes, meaning that they have actually had more money to spend, but that's not enough. The fourth would be to bring a real end to austerity. Now, the problem here is the SNP will never, ever have a majority in Parliament, so their budget, their manifesto, is not costed, which renders a lot of their claims moot. They might have a leg to stand on if they formed a coalition with the Labour Party, because Labour want to spend. The fifth policy is to scrap Trident, get rid of the UK's nuclear deterrent, and then spend that money on public services instead. Nicola Sturgeon has stated this will be a red line for the SNP if it were to back any Labour government. Jeremy Corbyn has been an opponent of nuclear weapons, but official Labour Party policy is to support the renewal of Trident. Even the Liberal Democrats say they'd keep Trident but reduce the nuclear posture of the round-the-clock patrols, with 3 instead of 4 submarines. And Parliament has already given a green light to build 4 new submarines to carry the Trident missiles at a cost of $35 billion. Protect the NHS is policy number 6, which would mean introducing a bill to protect the health services from privatisation and future trade deals. Maybe that's something that should be done in Parliament anyway. Just a thought. I'm joking, of course. We shouldn't be legislating to ensure that something is always going to be in the public domain. Maybe. 7. Tackles Scotland's drug crisis. The reason for this is because drug classification powers are a UK government thing. They are not a devolved administration power. And Scotland has quite the drug death crisis, with an escalating number of drug deaths in Scotland in 28, a record total of 1,187, with it being the worst rate in the EU, and 3 times higher than the rest of the UK as a whole. The SNP believe that some of the radical solutions can't be explored because drugs policy needs to be reversed by Westminster under the 1971 Misuse of Drugs Act. The SNP want the powers to allow a consumption room in Glasgow where users could inject or smoke their own illegal drugs, which is quite an interesting idea. 8. tackle the climate emergency, which means that the UK government would match Holyrood's climate change targets, with the net zero target, carbon emission target that is, being reduced from 2050 to 2045, which is what the SNP intend to do in Scotland. 9. Devolve control of migration. Scotland, or the SNP, have an open doors policy, something which does not match the current government's position at all. So they would want to have that power within themselves, because then they can just say, hey, come here, come culturally enrich us. We're trying to restore our livers. 10. Increase paternity leave, which would mean to up the provision of paid leave for parents and encourage fathers to take more time off. I actually kind of support this one. Nicola Sturgeon says its offer would be a game changer with a new 12-week use it or lose it period of daddy leave. Parents are currently entitled to convert up to 50 weeks of their 52-week maternity leave to shared parental leave, but take-up by dads has been stubbornly low. The SNP is offering to extend this to 64 weeks with 12 weeks ring-fenced for fathers to encourage them to take the time off with their new babies. I kind of know why fathers don't. It's an obvious one, but it'd be interesting to see if anyone bites that. 11. Further devolution of work and welfare powers. Give Scotland control of employment law and more benefits. I would assume this is because they don't want anything to do with universal credit. And they also want to introduce a real living wage, by the way, which is calculated on the basis of what workers need by increasing it by £1.09 an hour on this year's figures. So they want a statutory living wage, basically. I would say, I have long argued that the cost of living in certain areas cost a certain amount, therefore, wages should of course match that. It shouldn't be a case that people struggle by on a full-time wage. That kind of defeats the point. 12, the final one, devolve more transport powers, because the SNP want to build better train services that are greener public transport, which actually surprised me that they didn't have any control over, although part of me thinks they'll just sell it off anyway at the first chance to raise more money to spend on health, because they've got to look good, everyone. Optics are so fecking important.